Warum sagst du? Der Record. Okay. So einfach anschauen. Okay.
Aber jetzt sieht man ja recht gut. Jetzt muss ich gar nicht unbedingt schwenken. Man sieht die Liste an. Dann muss ich nicht schwenken.
Nein, das ist gut. Aber
also ohne schwenken.
Vielleicht hier, so man sieht das.
Okay.
Ich nehme jetzt eine Präsentation. So. Sehr gut.
Aber die Leute sieht man gar nicht. Also man sieht keinen Hinterkopf.
Was?
Man sieht keine Menschen.
Okay.
Ich
Dann machen wir einmal tief oder sowas, aber ist egal. Okay, ich erkläre es, ist schon jetzt an Recording. Aber ihr könnt reden und solche Dinge sowieso. Ich kann sie umnehmen, kann das. Ja. Ist ein Experiment. Ich werde in Englisch reden, weil ich habe diese Idee vor, dass ich bin immer eingeladen für diese Lectures, Performance Lectures nennen die da. Aber ich will etwas, mein nächstes Jahr schon eine Remise Kunsthalle, ich plane so Installationen, wo ich kann darin reden über gewisse Dinge. Dass ich werde in Dr. Great Art, where I explain great art. So, ich mache es in Englisch, was bedeutet übrigens, ich bin sogar doppelt schneller in Englisch als in Deutsch. Ich muss ab und zu vielleicht sagen, it's really hard for me to speak slowly. When I get northern, I just start having northern because I don't hardly have any accent at all. Because I come from Chicago, so I could just rap. I could tell you whatever's on tap. I could das ist unsere Natur. So I'm going to do it, and then I'll edit it. Ich werde das Editing dann selber machen. So einfach zu sehen, wie es aussieht. Weil das ist mein Plan, ein bisschen als Verkaufsinstrument. Okay? So now I go to English, right? And she's the computer. Right? So you can say things if you want to and so on. It's okay, right? You can speak all different languages. We'll confuse the audience. You say things in Italian, you say them in Russian, we'll say them and we'll act like we understand. Schweizerdeutsch. Niemand weiß sogar, dass es gibt Schweizerdeutsch. So here, that's the beginning. I will show you then, this is what I'm going to start them with. Something like this. But I will edit that in, actually. Okay, what are we looking at here? I'm going to look at one work. Now, usually I teach this group, art history, so I cover a large spectrum, but I never have the chance because we don't have long, the years not so long, to do one work, but I think this is a special one, and that's what I really want to do. This is by Artemisia Gentileschi. Anybody remember her? From the Baroque, first really famous woman artist. I'll talk more about her life as I go through, but not much, mostly about the painting. A few things about her right away, though, is she was both praised and disdained by her contemporaries. And this is a self-portrait, we think, but I'll come back. This is it. Because they said, and I quote, here's something for the women, that she was genius, but monstrous because she was a woman, and creative things were reserved for men. Right? So she was surprising in this time. I think she is an amazing genius, especially in this painting, but in many others. And since then, she has, as Mary D. Garrard said, she has suffered a scholarly neglect that is almost unthinkable for an artist of her caliber. She is so great and was totally ignored, essentially removed from art history in the 17 and 1800s. And the feminists brought her back. But also art historian Longo brought her back in Italy at first, and then it came later from the feminists primarily. And she has now made quite a comeback. I think she's pretty amazing. Her father trained her in Rome when it was, as I've already told you before, illegal to train women to be artists. You could go to jail for teaching women to be artists. In the whole world, not just Italy. He did it. As I said, he probably, as far as we can tell, he gave her the clothing of a boy, called her by a boy's name, trained her as an apprentice until it was too late. And everybody noticed she was a woman and she was already great. And he is a very good painter, but she's even better. She was really great. Because of her father, she got to know Caravaggio, the father of Baroque art, because he was Caravaggio's friend. It appears, from what I've read, that he was even his drinking buddy. They went out carousing, as you know Caravaggio did, and they spent the night in jail together, as a matter of fact. So she is one of Caravaggi's. There's also the famous tale about her rape. She was one of the first women to go to court to charge one of her teachers for having raped her. And it was quite complicated. I'm not going to go very far into this, but this is very important. It was important for law. But it sticks on her a little bit too much because I think it detracts and makes her life more about her bad experiences and less about her art. But she had, of course, both. But I want to talk here about just this. The self-portrait as the allegory of painting. You can correct my Italian. Autoritratto in veste di pittura.
More or less.
Or simply, we generally, our historians give everything nicknames, we call it la pittura. It was painted in probably 1638 or 1639 when she was in England. And that's where it still is, which is one reason it's seen a little bit less. What about this? This is a very interesting thing. Is this a self-portrait? What's the symbolism? The composition is amazing. The painting style is amazing. It seems to be a portrait symbolizing painting. This is an allegorical figure. You know what allegorical figures are? Things that stand, symbolists stand for something, usually in a big story. I've got this wonderful instrument they gave for me, this was the traditional symbol. This is from Cesare Ripa's Iconologia in 1593. It was written in Latin. And this is the symbol. So painting with the mouth covered, with this amulet that stands for what, probably? For representation, making pictures. What's this about? Why would you make painting? It's kind of insulting to us, I think. It's to say the painting is, right, mute. It doesn't talk, it just shows pictures, which I would disagree with. And she does, especially as a woman. I don't think any woman wants to see a picture of herself like this done by a man. We might risk our life. So notice in hers, she's not colored. She's concentrating. Her mouth is closed and so, but it's not. But the rest is typical. Amulet, we would say, right? In the one hand, the extra brushes in the palette, in the other, a brush beginning to paint a painting. That was standard, but look at what makes her extraordinary, what she does with that that's so different. Now, is it her? Here are a couple pictures. That is a self-portrait of her playing a female martyr, 1650. And this is a etching of her by someone else, Jérôme David, later, because she was famous for quite a while before they took her out. Now, is that her? I think so. But we all know artists have the tendency, when you paint pictures that are imaginary, as you probably noticed, my publico, my audience here is mostly artists. You tend to make the people look a bit like you. Okay? So maybe, but I think it is a self-portrait, and I think she's playing on something interesting there. No man could paint himself as painting, because painting is a woman symbolically. So a woman goes, hey, I can make myself paint. And yeah, she's a little bit chunkier here. She's a little bit heavier than in the other ones, but it's also because of the tip of her head. And, you know, we all go up and down. We get heavier and thinner and heavier, especially we old people. Here's her more famous, which I've shown you. I didn't show you much of her self-portrait. So is it her? I think so. It was first proposed that it was a self-portrait by Michael Levy in 1962, but many art historians think it's not. One thing she did say, I'll go back to her because it's so interesting. She has several very interesting statements she made in writing about her hopes as an artist that I think are indicative. One, she said, asked about artists, she said, I am painting. That's strong, right? At the time when women weren't even really allowed to paint, she said, I am painting. So I think she had the wherewithal to portray herself as art. Don't forget, please remember, don't forget that in the Renaissance, beforehand, art was very much just artisans, hand workers. It was not only for men, it was looked down on. We were at the same level as shoemakers. It's only because of Leonardo and Michelangelo that we get to these philosophical heights. When women weren't allowed in either, philosophy or handwork. They were supposed to stay home and do whatever you're supposed to cook or something. And so she's defying both. I think I'm going to show you it's wonderful because it emphasizes the thought process and the work. I think it's quite amazing self-portrait. So that, I think it is her. Looks to me like her. So here is the one that has made her more famous. Judith and all the Feonis. She's one of the Caravaggisti, which means Caravaggio followers. They called themselves that. Her father, as I said, Orazio, was also one of those, following Caravaggio. He originally was a mannerist painter who was a little bit older than Caravaggio. When he meets Caravaggio, probably with a drink, he converts and begins to paint very similar to Caravaggio and trains Artemisia in this tendency, and she becomes one of the greatest ones. One reason why they spent a night in jail together was, by the way, that he and Caravaggio and another man wrote insulting poetry about a man named Baglioni. Baglioni was a jerk. He was kind of a follower to Vasari. He was an artist, not very good, but a critic, or nowadays he'd probably be a curator, and he wanted power over the artists, and he hated Caravaggio because of his wild lifestyle. And he tried to get him out of art history. He wrote, history never mentioned Caravaggio, which is ridiculous. He managed for quite a long time. Caravaggio was not in history by historians, but all the artists loved him. Rembrandt, Rubens, they all said, we are Caravaggisti, and so on. Yeah, so they wrote these poetry, by the way, about insulting Baglioni. He sued them, and there was a problem. Anyway, Orazio and Caravaggio spent the night in jail. But Caravaggio spent many nights in jail, usually because he was drunk and got in a fight. And Orazio was probably with him. Back to her picture, that's more her. What are some things we're going to look at? Her brush, the composition. Here we have the amulet, the pendant that we saw, the palette, right? And you'll see, very strange, down below, I have to try and get a close-up, it's so dark, it's hard to see. She signed it with her initials and an F. A point, G point, dot, and F dot, which means Artemisia Gentileschi fecit. This is from fecere. That was common in this time. In Latin, you wrote fecit. It means made this. So you would write your name and then just an F here, so I made this. So it is signed, which was also not very common. One of the reasons hardly people knew who made what. You didn't need to sign it much. Another statement of hers that I think fits with her wonderful impression of herself, let's say she was proud of what she could achieve, as she said once in a letter, and I will show our most illustrious lordship, who she's writing to, what a woman can do. You will find the spirit of Caesar in the soul of this woman. She's tough. Her most famous paintings, such as the Judith and all the Feonis, we've gone through in class. But this is the one we're looking at closely. It's so famous now, just beginning to be, that actually in the movie made about her, Artemisia, 1997 movie starring Valentina Cervi, they recreate part of the setup. But notice how much less creative it is than hers. Just look at her. She's tipped. It's crazy. It's wild. This is empty. It's a huge arc, which I'll go over later. Look at what do they do in the movie? Well, it's like a close-up in depth. It's cool. And they try and recreate. She probably had to use 2 different mirrors to see herself that way. So they try and do that's kind of interesting. But they show the painting. I think it's far less creative. I did use it myself as the basis for a painting I did in my last show called Painting Acted Artist of Artemisia, but really of Cervi playing Artemisia. Because I'm taping the sound too, yeah, so you're going to be on there. This is here, and I stole a bit of her composition because I think she's so much better. So here we have mine, back to Artemisia herself though, and her wonderful self-portrait, and how challenging it is. A few things about the painting. There's very little underdrawing. There is underdrawing for the left arm. Here. So she clearly was a little bit uncertain here, but did the rest almost none though, which meant she painted alla prima, fast, or correct. She knew what she was doing so much. Probably did drawings in advance, but mostly painted directly on. What else did I find out that she had done? The rolled up sleeve is pretty interesting, where she pushes her sleeve up. Here in the op. And here we see pentimenti. That's when there's little changes underneath the paint. You see how they change their mind. They painted, corrected. Because we now do x-rays and so on. Radiography and so on. That you can see that she changed this several times, including lengthening the finger primarily into this weird where she chops off the brush. Now did she, they used to chop off paintings too, so we don't know how much. Sometimes they would fit new frames and so on, but either way, the brush comes to the edge, which I think is highly symbolically important. The position is very difficult, so she probably did drawing, but she did it really quickly, which is amazing. What about the foreshortening? What about that? Foreshortening is perspective of a person, radical foreshortening, radical perspective of a person that she's doing. Here's something else, a good painting by a man about the same time, Johannes Cornelius Spronk. The typical one. Now, that's not his family. That's a portrait. He did that as a job. So, of course, they want something more staid and traditional. But that would be the typical way we paint portraits. Look at the difference where she tips herself. She goes into space and out of the space. This is very different. See the blank, much more radical chiaroscuro. She makes some very white and very dark. I think a lot. Now she has the embroidery, little bits. But it's much more, less important. That was very important in those days. If you could afford that. Okay? That's what made St. Gallen, where I'm speaking here, rich. This stuff. See the difference with a standard portrait at that time. I drew it so you can see. Just a little bit better what's there. Although in my style, which is pretty wild. But you see, here she is. This is the whole swoop. Here's her arm here, holding a square palette. We'll talk about the colors later. And her arm is on the grinding stone where you made the colors. Remember, or made the paint. Remember, I said before that you couldn't buy paint in tubes till the Impressionists. So you had to do it. So she's very much the worker here and working here and thinking there. This is the standard way we artists study perspective to see if we're getting it right. You usually draw that first and then look at it a little bit and then draw that. And you see, look at this where it goes into space here. This comes forward. This goes this way. It's quite difficult. It's one of the most difficult. It's also not very flattering. Most people don't do it. Two very unflattering things with this funny tip here. So you come forward up the nose. And you don't see this kind very much. It's wonderful foreshortening until, well, you do see it, sorry, from her, where she's it, by Caravaggio. For instance, this is the conversion of St. Paul. And it's an in situ shot, which is kind of nice. So you can see that it looks almost like St. Paul's falling out of the painting. Whoa, I saw Jesus. Boom. But not as much as you would expect until really comic books. Some of my heroes. Jack Kirby, who's the king of this, he's the one who first used insanely radical foreshortening. This goes so ridiculously into perspective in the back. It goes forward and here and chopped off. And you have other ones, Gene Colan, influenced by Jack Kirby, but does more of the standard figure construction with a similar thing. And two of insane, up the nose and the tip. Two ones most artists can't carry off. And he manages. A little bit of showing off, but it's wonderful. Or my master, Gene Colan, who does several together. He's going one way, he's going another, he's going another, leg goes in. He's using multiple, slightly, actually not correctly, not placed exactly correctly together, but that's on purpose. He knows exactly what he's doing. He could do totally realistic. He wanted that for the drama, to get insane perspective. And it begins with people like Artemisia. Here I've artificially lightened it a bit. You can see some of the effects. It's hard to see. There's a little blue of her arm here. Here's her hand. Here's the grinding, and there's colors on there. Wonderful eyes, too, where she's looking somewhere here. Okay. One thing I'd like to talk about that is, speaking of the palette, is color. Some of the meta levels. When I say meta, I mean painting about itself. She uses things in the painting to refer to itself and to herself and to painting. One is colors. It's really hard to see because the painting has gone darker, plus the bad photographs. So I tried to lighten it, but you can really see, because in paintings, right, you can look into shadows. You can't in photos because it resists. The paintings your eyes adjust, multiple f-stops or whatever in your eyes, in your brain. But if you look at it, she has on her palette the colors that she paints the painting. So essentially what she's painting is the painting you're looking at. So you have, and they're very masterful colors that, go back to the painting, where do I have? Yeah, we'll come here. She's using pairs of contrast. She's got this reddish-brown background, which is almost the color of canvas itself, because that's actually the canvas linen they worked on, and then but would be primed and so on, but she painted it, but it looks a little bit like that. It's a red-brown, which then is opposed to this green. Well, red-brown. Red and green are complementary. It's really elegant combination. She has brown here, too. Right? And brown is a yellow, a dark yellow, actually. And the opposite of yellow is purple. And she has purple highlights because it's a satin that changes color. That's also a bit of showing off at these times. It was known in the Baroque that one of the hardest things on earth was to paint satin that shifts colors. The satin can be really where it has really two different colors. She has this. Now it's a little hard to see in the photo, but this is very lila, you would say in German, or purple for us. Also, I forgot to say about her clothing. She's wearing upper-class clothing at this time. Can't believe women would paint in such a thing, but they weren't all the time. But over it, she has looks to me like leather, but definitely is an apron. So once again, she combines in this embroidery. She combines this elegance, showing she's higher class, with this handworker, artisan thing. There's the colors, and so you see there's a brown, a green, off-whitish, different ones. The red you can hardly see she used. They were very dark, of course, in those days, and they have darkened since then. It is, as you see in the colors, she places herself. There was a big battle in these days that I've mentioned before between colore and disegno, so color and drawing. Titian, and Michelangelo. She clearly aligns herself with Tiziano, with Titian, with color, less than her, although she draws like a dream. It's an amazing thing, the way she's placed everything. To me, it is a painting, about this painting, and about all painting. And that's what makes it so modern, almost postmodern. So I'm going to link it to another similar meta painting, which I've shown you. Las Velázquez, Las Meninas from Velázquez, that I can't do, hardly. Velázquez, Las Meninas. Everybody knows this one. It's one of the most beloved paintings of all painters. Most of us go visit it regularly in the Prado because we're involved in it. There he is, self-portrait, painting a painting. I could go on and on, there are books about this, but painting the same proportions. He's probably painting this painting, but he pauses and looks. Because we, the spectators, are probably the king and queen who came to see. So he pauses a moment. But he's acknowledging the viewer. and acknowledging his activity. He has elegant clothes, including his knighthood symbol. And then he pauses. Looks. She does something similar, but even more modern. Well, there he is. You can see him back closer up here. Stylish mustache. Here we compare the two. Can you guys be quiet? Because I'm taping, actually. Oh, sorry. Here he is. Here she is. What's the difference? She's not pausing for us, but she's leaning towards us. But she's totally engrossed in painting. She's painting. Very interesting. She's totally concentrating. He's a little bit more, he's the Hofmann. He's the court painter. Some other meta levels. The brush. This is beautiful. Of course, artists identify with their tools, and painters with the brush. Typically, it's quite it's beautiful. And look at where it ends, which to me is endlessly intriguing. It's either chopped off or touches exactly at the edge. Don't know exactly what she had originally. Either way, she's painting essentially the painting you look at. She's at the edge. It's exactly what we always tell you in school. Don't do. Don't touch things to the edge. Don't do, because it disturbs you. She's used that to make the whole thing stronger and emphasizes her hand. Brushes are important, by the way. It's one thing that interests me when I studied cognitive metaphor and brain science. You map in your head. They've seen that now with magnetic resonance, so you map your body. They can find your map. And people, including tennis players, but especially artists, who use the same instrument over and over, the brain maps the body with the instrument as if it's part of the body. So my brain thinks my body goes like this with this on the end. It thinks the brush is part of my body. That's why you're able to think essentially at the tip. And so she's got that. She's got this part of her body. It goes into the whole ensemble. Brushes are famous. I love them. I painted a bunch of self-portraits with ones. I copied the Velázquez's, genau, exactly. And then made my version. This is my hand with my paintbrush. This is my hand with paintbrush I used a lot. Paintbrushes from my father. So it was a self-portrait without a face. And I didn't really think about her at the time, but it could have been stolen from that. You never know what you're being influenced by. But that alone, I think, makes the whole painting amazing. Back to Artemisia. Absorb. Look at her head. Let's look at that again. I think I have a close-up. Look at her expression. She is concentrating, right? This is really, she's not looking at us. She's not looking, she's not just posing. Usually people are just posing. She's thinking really hard about what she's painting. The light is amazing. Not only does it come from one spot, clearly, as usually in the Baroque, and highlights these things, which allows her to be very light and very dark, so she can direct attention through this. But also the light itself is in perspective. It's not coming this way, it's coming from here. So she's leaning out of the painting and the light is coming from, so it's like something's going on about this far in front of the painting. The light and her, she's leaning up. So she's actually put even the light, that's why I put the arrow, in perspective, in foreshortening. Texture is extremely important in Baroque paintings. And for people who love materials such as textiles and so on, that's very important. It was for them, the Dutch and so on made a fortune from them. They had just begun painting on linen. This is textiles are very important. And this was one of the most loved. Either silk or satin. Which one do you think it is? I don't know enough. It's probably silk, because that was the most expensive. And it shimmers. See where it goes from. And look at her masterful way she does that. That is, by the way, a dream to try and paint. It's horribly difficult and lots of fun. And she is showing off. She shows she can do it. So not only is a woman wearing it, she's making it, which is quite interesting. Reminds me a little bit of guitarist. It's showing off, but so what if you can't get it? She did. Her hair, she does wonderful. Her hair flies off. That's always fun, right? Usually you paint people and they want their hair all plastered down. But actually the fun are all these little things here that go off. Right? And she does that. And they become paint strokes. She has this hair. This black Italian hair that then flies off. And her palette, as I said, and the grinding stone. This is different textures. And this little bit of blue clothing, which must be underneath that we don't see. It gives one tiny little height, just tiny little bit of red and tiny little bit of blue, just to break, otherwise it would be all green and brown. The people are brownish. The composition, that I think is the biggest one. Right? I think that's what really makes it the superstar painting that it is. Because it carries all the meaning, it's all the metaphor. The rest are great, wonderful additions. Now we have a remains of the Renaissance perspective. You could find a kind of triangle, but she's lopped off the side. This is very Baroque. And remember, I taught you, I think the main creativity of the Baroque is the spiral. She has several spirals. Your eye basically travels through her arms, so through the worker, through the body, through her head, the thinker, to the hand, the producer. And it makes a little, to me, it makes a little loop in the middle. And I don't mean around the mouth, I mean around her head and goes through the eyes. So you look, whoa! And there she's violating most perspective. But she manages to hold, violating most compositional rules that teachers teach. She's off to the side, and she swoops through. But she balances that by having this giant, wonderful, empty area that would be like the Japanese, where they leave so many empty areas. And it's the color almost of the canvas. So it's almost like empty canvas. Plus, she does the counterpoint. It's so nice. She has one slight swoop because of her tipping. The green arrow here shows that she has a counterpoint to that helps hold it too. So she's got counterpoint, spiral. And that the spiral was a genius invention at this time because it gave you a stable composition that's still active. You don't have the traditional, very stable. It's more active, and often they tipped it into space. And again, her foreshortening that she is leaning towards us, so she's going into space and towards us. And she emphasizes that in a few tiny little details. First, straightness here, and there, and this, I think is wonderful. I mean, it comes, it falls down, which emphasizes that she's a woman because it falls because of her breasts. It wouldn't do that with a man, but she doesn't make that sexy really. There's hardly any kind of cleavage or anything. It's just that thing. It's a very strong edge and emphasizes she's a woman. It shows very much. So she's, you know, had it difficult being a female painter, but she's showing, yeah, I'm a female painter and I paint damn well. Okay, so he's showing off and I like that. Here we go. So I think it's an amazing self-portrait. And she's saying, not only am I a female painter, am I a painter, am I an artist, I am painting because she has symbols. I am painting itself. Reminds me a bit of Jackson Pollock when they asked him, where's nature? He said, I am nature. For her, it's like, how can you be a painter? Not only am I a painter, I am painting itself, which is female. La pittura. Right? So it is weiblich, it's feminine in the Italian. So that is our amazingly great single painting. Artemisia Gentileschi, La Pittura, Self-Portrait. How's it? Now I'm going to film you all so that you have to appear in the film.
Stop.
Yeah, I know.